Hi, everyone. This is Joanne Beckeridge from the library. Thanks for coming to our Women's History Month program. Our book group this Thursday is also women themed, and we'll be discussing the book Woman of Troublesome Creek. And you can find more Women's History Month events on somawomen.org. Our speaker tonight is ByGriselle Casasola from the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts. I can't imagine the stress of being the first lady. So this is going to be a very interesting talk. You can put your questions in the chat and I'll relay them to ByGriselle at the end. Welcome, ByGriselle.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna hide here. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, my name is ByGriselle, and I work in that beautiful building right there that you see in your screen. That it is located in 9 Main Street, Madison, New Jersey. And this building is full and filled with history. The building was built in 1899. It was finished December of 1899, and it was open to the public in May. By late spring and early summer of 1900, right there. Now, take a look at the actual building in there. If you ever been there, and if you haven't been in there, I strongly suggest you to come because it's beautiful, and we are getting ready to actually install a new exhibit. The last exhibit in the main gallery that we have is currently in the process of being changed, so I think it's going to be ready for late spring or summer. So the museum has been a museum since 1969, since it opened as a museum in 1970. But before it was a museum, it was something different. It was something else. It was built to be something else. Now, a lot of people actually say or think that it was a church, because if you see it from the outside, and even if you go inside, you say, oh, but this is the same building as just a church, right? It has the stained glass, it has the tower, and on top, it has the layout, like it's long and short, like a crucified layout. They have the stone and everything. But no, it was never a church. It was actually Madison's first library. It opened as a library, like I said, in summer of 1900, but then it stayed too little and too short in the late 1960s. By the time that 1960, 1965 arrived, then it was just too little, too small. Madison was growing a lot. This is what it used to be, the James Library reading room. Mr. James was actually the person, the philanthropist that donated the money and absolutely everything for the building to be built. And if you can see in the over there in the walls and also in the middle in the tables, the building was built with electricity. Madison had bodies of water surrounded, so they were able to have their own plants. And at the end of the 1800s, this was a very innovative building because it was able to have electricity from the beginning. Now, this picture is from the 1940s, late 1930s, and early 1940s. This is what it used to be. And now that is the same, exactly, the same room. This is what it used to be, the library, the reading room. But then this is the main gallery now. So this is where we actually have all of our exhibits. And right now, if you see over there in the background over there, you see the beautiful stained glasses or the windows. I'm going to show you a few of those. And that exhibit right there is from 2019. And right now, that space right there is going to be changed and transformed into another and a new exhibit for a museum. These are some of the paintings that we have in the stained glasses, and that when people come inside and come close, then they actually see and realize, okay, so this is not a quote from the Bible. This is not a painting or a picture from the Bible. Every single one of the paintings and the quotes that we have in the windows are related to something that is to promote and to engage education, art, music, science, anything related to what humans need to actually develop a culture. Either it's in architecture, also paintings, drawings, poets, like recite. So anything that's related with that. And we do have another program that is related to all the different paintings and the artists and the quotes that we have in the window. So if you're ready, just let us know. But today, and I can't believe it's already the 7th, March 7th, and it seems to me that my birthday is in January. It seems to me that I was just celebrating my birthday a few weeks ago, and now it's already March. So we're gonna be talking about the ladies. Remember the ladies. So everyone knows, and everyone knows that we have presidents, right? Now, those presidents, actually most of them, with the exception of just one, they were married, right? Or some of them were widowers, but they were married, they had families. So they needed the first ladies in there. So we're gonna be talking about not only the first lady, but also the hostesses and the actual role as the first, I would say the first 150 years, how these roles sometimes were divided. And it wasn't until the early 20th century that the role was just all converted in just one person. It was the first lady, no more host. So we're gonna be talking about the two different roles because it wasn't always filled by the same person. The tension between that public role that some of them really didn't want, because some of the first ladies didn't want their husbands to actually become president. Some of them, they didn't even want their husbands to go into politics at all. And then that tension between that role and the private actual role. So some of them didn't really want to become known or known for anyone or by anyone. So they really wanted to keep their lives private. So it was a very difficult moment for many of them, and it was a tension moment for them too. But some of them were really interested into being in the spotlight, so they actually took advantage and had the opportunity to be more influential and to actually use their role for something good. And also the fact that many of them really supported many of the different causes, like helping another woman and helping the poor. And some of them actually were really important in the moment of the crucial moments when slavery was a very hard and important topic, and when all of that came to the conclusion that we have today. So definitely the first ladies had a very important role into that. Now, the first one, for President George Washington, we have Martha Washington. You will see as I continue to talk that many of them had very long names. Sometimes they have first, middle names, and they have a third name, but also they also had different last names. Some of them because they were married before, or just their maiden name. Now, she followed President Washington during the American Revolution. She helped soldiers, and she gained a really strong support from the soldiers, because the soldiers of the American Revolution really saw someone in her that they really connected with her. They really saw that she cared about them. She helped them. She remained in favor of slavery. Remember, this is way early, and we're going to see some of them that even 100 years later, some of them were still in favor of slavery. She was the first historical woman to be put on a postage stamp. So this is not only the program for the first ladies, but it's also the program for so many firsts. We're gonna get to see really so many firsts in this one. Then Abigail Adams, for President John Adams, she didn't have a formal education, but she was an avid reader. So at least she was able to learn how to read, and she really, really was an avid reader. In the contrary with Martha, she was opposed to slavery, but she wasn't an abolitionist at the moment. It was really, there was really no no word or no sense of abolitionist at that point, at that matter for so many people. Where there were people that really were against completely, but in the presidency, it was just it was too early for that. Sad, but that was the reality. That was the truth. She was actually the first lady to live in the actual White House, and she was also the first one to had a book that it was published based on her, based on a first lady. Then we have Martha, the wife of Thomas Jefferson, Martha Jefferson. She actually inherited her father's plantation and many slaves when he died. She was the first of 5 women to be married to the men who became presidents after their death. So we're gonna have 5 of those. And this is a portrait that it was really a portrait based on descriptions because we really don't have a picture of her like a really good picture. So this was the best that we could find from her. She died before he took office in 1801. She was very young. So to the right, you're gonna get to see the picture or the paintings of them, and I really want you to take a look or a moment or a second to the ways that they were actually portrayed in many of the paintings, and then later into the actual photos, the way they dress, the way they dress themselves, the way they use jewelry, the ones that didn't use at all. We can talk a little bit about that at the end for sure. Then we have Martha Patsy, the daughter of Thomas Jefferson. She was not the hostess, but she went with him on the first diplomatic mission to France. Now, Monticello was actually this huge plantation, and it had a lot of land in Virginia, and she actually ran the plantation, but she was opposed to slavery. So that's something that it struck a nerve on us because she ran the thing, but she was opposed. So you see, there's so many difficult decisions in there. Now, Dolly Madison served as Jefferson's escort and hostess. So that's what I'm saying, that in many of these occasions, one lady did one thing and then the other one did the other thing and like that. So this was Dolly Madison was the first lady for James Madison. Now, what do we have to say about her? She was the first lady to actually be photographed, but she wasn't photographed when she was the first lady. She was photographed when she was older, a lot older. So you see in your right the photograph of her as an old lady, and then the painting when she was younger, when she was the first lady. She famously refused to leave the White House during the burning of DC during the War of 1812 until President Washington's portrait was removed. So if we have that portrait, if we have that painting right now in 2022, it's because of this woman. She was willing to die in order to say that portrait because that was the only thing that we had from him. Remember, this was in the 1700s. It was a long time ago. It wasn't that at that moment there was not even a photograph, so it was only the painting. So she famously saved that painting. She was the earliest first lady, like I said, to be photographed, and she was the first private citizen to send a telegraph as a private citizen. Anything other than that, the telegraph were actually used for anything related to war, to the army, to connection between one place to another, but in regard to the government. And we have Elizabeth Monroe, the first lady for President Monroe. She had a very limited public role as a first lady because she was very reserved, very private, but also because she did have problems with her health. The daughter Eliza Monroe, she was the one who actually served as the role as the hostess. Now, the hostess, that role was only about to serve in the White House, doing like welcoming people to the White House, preparing and getting everything ready for a meeting, for a party, anything related as being in charge of what was going on in the White House. Nothing related with politics at all. Daughter Maria Monroe was the actual first presidential child married in the White House. Now in here, we have Louisa Adams for a president, John Quincy Adams. She was the first lady that wasn't born here in the US. She was born in London, in England. She was very well educated in England and in France. And she was really beyond the limit of the place of a woman at that time. So women were really not favored in so many ways, both politically and professional. And she was kind of the exception for her time. She was very passionate to defending women's rights and her own family's rights. So she knew that if she had to actually have everything written down in order for her family to have some sort of safety and secure. Like she knew that the politics changed, and in a matter of seconds something can change. But if she had everything written down for her and for her family, then she was fine. She was the first one of the first ladies who actually became strongly anti-slavery, and we can say that she was like a preview for what happened later with others that became abolitionists for sure. And she was definitely the first one to be born in the outside of the United States, and until this day we only have two, and the second one was centuries later than her. And she was the first one who opened the White House to the public. So before then, that anything that happened in the White House, it was only government stuff. It was only anything related with the president, and anything that it was not access to the actual public. Then we have Rachel Donaldson, wife of Andrew Jackson, and this is where we find the first scandal, as if we say today, like if I ask you, if I was there with you guys, or you were in the museum and I was doing this program in person, I would ask you, do you think politics is something like, like dark and many times really dirty? But do you think that's something new? Do you think that's something that is only started like, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago? And sadly, no. She was actually the first. She was the first time that a personal event was used against the presidential candidate. Now, she was the first of three first ladies who were divorced prior to marrying the president. Now, John Quincy Adams actually used that to attack them and attack Jackson on his campaigns for president. Now, today they say and they become with plots even worse than this. But sadly, it's like normal that one campaign does this to the other campaign, from one political party to the other one. But back then, it was like really, really, it was just a scandal, right? Now she died, and of course, we don't have the proof that she died because of this. She was really ill, but this didn't help. So Jackson blamed Adams and Adams supporters for her death. And she really had a political impact in so many people, even after her death, because of this. Now, the hostess for Andrew Jackson, Emily Donaldson, daughter of Rachel Jackson's brother, her term actually ended. Her term as a hostess ended because she died from TB, from tuberculosis. It was the first time that a presidential relative formally given the status of White House hostess. Again, it was just a moment where sadly everyone was actually dying from an illness, from something that today we will have like a regular normal medicine, like a cold or something simple. But back then it was they didn't have any medicine, so a lot of them were really in really bad health. Then we have Sarah George Jackson, hostess for Andrew Jackson again. Jackson's daughter-in-law. She was married to Andrew Jackson Jr. She actually served, because we have Emily, and she served as a co-hostess with Emily, something that was actually done one time, that time and only. So apparently, either there were a lot of things to do, like many, many things to do, the one person cannot possibly do it. Or maybe one of them it was really into just more private, and then the other person took a little bit more into the role, because that was the only time that two different ladies were together being hostess of the White House. Then we have Hannah Van Buren, again, died before he took office in 1837. She grew up in a rural community in New York, so I'm assuming if it was rural, we were doing some research, but if it was really rural, it was in upstate New York, not in New York City. Now, the legend suggests that she and Van Buren were actually childhood sweethearts. We will love to have this as a real confirmed fact, but we saw it in so many documents that we were doing the research for the program. And yes, that's what we think. We would love to have like some sort of door so we can go back and see if these things were true or not. But she actually died while he was still serving in the New York State Senate. So she wasn't even there in the inauguration and everything. She died before. Now, Angelica Van Buren was the hostess. So she was married to Van Buren's son, and she was really very different from what you see in here. So take a look at the painting of, or the drawing of Hannah, the way that she was wearing her dress, everything was covered. I don't see any jewelry. If she had any jewelry, it was very well hidden under that dress. But Angelica was completely different. She was born and raised in an aristocratic family in South Carolina. So look at the hair. I from this picture we can see that she probably has some feathers in her hair. Her dress, absolutely everything is completely different from her previous one. Now she really tried to create the atmosphere of an European White House. So this had a really backfire dilemma, because a lot of people feared the attacks to Van that he was still monarch. That he was still into the monarchy and wanted to stay in that with England, which is just, to me, it's just the way that she was raised. But that this was a small scandal comparing to the President Quincy Adams and Jackson. But still, people were trying to concentrate into something like that to just create more problem and more drama, if you can say it that way. Then we have Anna Harrison, the wife of President William Harrison. She really had the opportunity to be educated, so she inspired the fight for women's rights. So this is why so many women were not even allowed to study. And this we know from other programs that we do also. A lot of women were not allowed to study, because once you can read, once you can study, once you can have a higher education, of course, you will know how to defend yourself, how to defend your rights. So therefore, men will not be able to do with you anything that they want. So that's one of the main reasons that they didn't want many young ones, and of course women, to become more literate, to become scholars, to go to the actual universities. So she took advantage of that education, and she actually helped into the development of women rights and helping those less fortunate, right? She was actually preparing to leave for Washington, D.C., sadly, when heard that her and her husband, William Harrison, had died. So she never served in reality because he died. Now, she was the actual first presidential widow given a pension by the Congress of $25,000, which is a lot of money comparing to what we have today, and even adding to the fact that she never really served. She was the first lady to have a formal education, and even though she wasn't the first lady, like a normal first lady for 4 years or for 8 years, she used that education to help others. And she was actually the first lady widow without holding the reality of being the first lady. So everyone just treats her after that, the first lady, even though she never really served. Then we have Jane Harrison for hostess for William Harrison. Now, the widow of William Henry, son, William Henry Jr., she was the widow, and she served only as the White House hostess for 4 weeks. So there was a transition, of course, between one first lady and then the other one. Of course, because the president died, Henry Harrison died. So there was a transition of 4 weeks, and then eventually John Tyler came. So Letitia Tyler was the first lady for President John Tyler. Tyler was the vice president for Harrison, and he became president upon his death. She had a very limited role as the first lady because, again, she was sick. She was very much sick most of the time, and she eventually died of a stroke. And even before that, she really had just trouble communicate with different people. She was the first presidential wife to die while being the first lady. So she was actually the first lady, and then she died. So she served for just a short period of time in here, like from 1841 to 1842, less than a year. Then we have Priscilla, the hostess, again, for John Tyler. She married Robert Tyler, which is John Tyler's son. She and Robert declared loyalty to the South when the Civil War broke out. Now, before Nancy Reagan, she was the only professional actress to serve as the White House hostess, and she was the first official hostess to give birth during her tenure. Take a look. I'm going to go back so you can see her dress. And also, I'm going to go for you so you can see Letitia. The simplicity of her dress of Letitia, and also in here too. And we are still trying to figure out what she has on her chest in here, in her cleavage, because we really don't know. We don't like to put new paintings or new photos of the actual first ladies or the presidents, because we want you to go as far as we can go. Then we have Letty Sample, was the hostess for John Tyler. And then John Tyler's daughter took over as hostess when Priscilla left. All right. And she was only there for just a very small period of time. She was shocked and hurt when she lost the position to her father's new wife. And I don't know why she was hurt. I don't know why she was shocked, because that was just the thing to do, right? That was the norm, that was the tradition, that was the rule. But she definitely was hurt and shocked. Then we have finally the first lady for John Tyler, Julia Gardner Tyler. Tyler was the first president to be married in office. And again, she has a very beautiful dress, different from other the dresses that we see that are just black or dark. She was very outgoing with her public appearance, and she defended slavery. All right, so she was At the moment and at the beginning, we can't see that we have many of the presidents or first ladies to actually be anti-slavery. She was the first lady to be known as to actively seek the newspaper coverage and in the social events. So if we can actually say in a way or compare it to today, that she was probably the Kardashian of the 1800s because she was the first to be a celebrity. She didn't care about the politics. She only wanted to be in the spotlight. Really, she just wanted the attention in every way possible. That's what she wanted. Then we have First Lady Sarah Polk for James, not Polk. Um, she was very more ambitious than the other one. She didn't have any children, and she was very interested in the political career of her husband. She, we have documents that say that she remained neutral in the Civil War, but then she supported the South. And this is one of the quotes that she said when her husband was actually in the run for presidency. And she said, "If I get into the White House, I will neither keep the house nor make butter." So she really didn't want to be like the traditional normal wife that I was expected to be. She really wanted to be in the action. She wanted to be with him, and she wanted to be as active as she could in his political career. Then we have completely 100 degree of difference between her and Margaret Taylor, the first lady for Zachary Taylor. Here in your right, you can see that her dress, her clothing, and her appearance completely different from many of the ones that we've seen so far. She spent almost 40 years traveling with Taylor around the frontiers on army assignments and even during the wartime. Um, but she didn't want him to become the president. So she didn't want it to be in the spotlight. She didn't want him to actually get into politics. So for that reason, she was the first lady, but their daughter, Mary Elizabeth Betty, served as hostess. Completely different from the previous one we were talking about. Then we have Abigail Power, and she was first lady for President Miller Fillmore. She was a public school teacher. She was actually um, the teacher of the president, and this is one of the reasons that I love this program because we have the other program, we have the president's program, we have Hail to the Chief, is the actual program. We will talk everything about the president. Many of the presidents didn't know how to read or write. Many of the presidents didn't have a formal education whatsoever, including Abraham Lincoln, who was able to learn how to read or write, and he had to teach himself law and everything that he knew because he wasn't formally educated in a higher education standard. Now, Fillmore was her student, one of her students. She was the first lady to come from a very lower economic class, first to work to pay before she was married. So she was the actual first lady who used to work for a payment before she was married. And she was the first one to have a salary from an independent employment as a married woman. Now, I don't know if you know this, but at least here in New Jersey, women were not allowed to keep working after they got married. So if you had a teacher, if you had some sort of job that it was a paid job with money, and you were single, right? You were not married yet, that was fine. The moment that you become married, the moment that you have a family, then you were expected to just take care of your husband, take care of your children, of your household, and you were not allowed to work outside for payment, right? So she, Abigail, was the first one to actually be able to stay with that job and still get paid for that job. Still, not everyone had that luxury or that privilege, but at least she was she was the first one. So this opened really the doors for so many others but it took a long time for that to change. Next one, we have Jane Pierce, First Lady for Franklin Pierce. She added furnace and she added a tile-covered bathroom with hot and cold running water to the White House. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, that's whatever. That's not," but that was big because the White House is a huge, huge building, and they didn't really have water at this moment. At this time, at this time of 1853 and 1857, they still don't have electricity. So she did something really important. Now, her uncle's widow, Abigail Means, performed the hostess duties. All right, so she was the first lady, but Abigail Means actually did the job of the hostess for 2 years. Then we are very close here, actually, to the Civil War, and we have Harriet Johnston, actually Harriet Rebecca for President James Buchanan. Now, she was very interested in anything about artists and music and paintings and anything related with art. So in her will, she actually left an art collection to the Smithsonian establish a so the Smithsonian can establish a national gallery of art. So she left all of that in her will. She was the first to actually be called on an article and read it down in 1960 to be the first lady. She was the first one being called that in read it words so that everyone can actually see it and read it. And she was the first one to have a really widely spread virtual image. Like she was known not only in the US but also widely globally as far as the the media of that time could actually go. Now we start a different era. We're gonna see so many different interesting information and facts after Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln time. Now, this is very interesting because we have done a lot of research not only for all the first ladies and the presidents, but also about Lincoln family and everything that the Civil War you know changed and had to do in the US history. Now, Mary came from a very wealthy Southern family who actually supported the South. So the fact that many of her family members and relatives stayed in the South and supported the South during the Civil War and supported the slavery, it really amazed me that she was opposing and against all of that. So she was very interested in politics from a very early age, and she became a strong abolitionist herself, right? So it was her. It was her who actually pushed President Lincoln to go to that path. Now we have documents that said that President Lincoln was anti-slavery, but he was not an abolitionist yet. So she helped him, and she was actually credited with helping him to see the human side and not just the political side of the abolition. The slavery is wrong and was wrong. It doesn't matter the color, the political party, or everything. Point. It was wrong. So she helped him with that. And we have information and documents that we can actually confirm that. She was, look at the time. They were in the White House for only 4 years because sadly he was assassinated right after he won the second term. But from 1861 to 1865, they were there, right? So this is 100 years later, and she was the first lady to finally welcome African Americans into the White House. To me, that's like, wow, simply wow. Then, of course, we have Andrew Johnson because he was the the president, of course, because Abraham Lincoln was killed. So Eliza Johnson, among the first ladies to be born into poverty. So not only low class family, low class income, no, really poverty. Um, but the President Johnson's education was very, very limited. So she actually helped him improve both his reading and his spoken communication. So she pushed him and she helped him. She was the wife of the only senator from the South that remained actually loyal to the Union when his state seceded. Okay, so when his state said, no, we declare, and eventually, the Civil War broke out, she was actually the wife of the only senator who remained loyal to the Union. Now, Martha Johnson hosted for Andrew Johnson. Johnson's daughter served as the primary hostess, and she was the greeter for the public. So she took care of that area. She really helped into the effort of collecting portraits in the White House. So if you go to the White House now, in a tour or anything that is open to the public, and you see the portraits that are there, we have her to thank her for that and for her idea. Because otherwise, we really wouldn't have absolutely anything from those years, and she was the one who opened the path for that. Then we have Julia for Ulysses Grant. We also know that he was very important in the war. He was eventually a very, very big help for Lincoln so that the war could be ended. So in 1886, pre-sales and sales of Grant of memoirs, his memoir, it was only 1 year after his death, led her to getting the largest single royalty check in history of $200,000. That was massive. Even this day is massive. It's a huge amount. Just imagine at that moment. She was the first one to give the press access to her and the White House. So she was open. She led the press to come both to the White House, but also to her. And she allowed the access to her children, which eventually change and form and develop what we know as the first family. So whenever we see the president and their family, we know that they are the first family of the country because everything related to the president and the first lady. And Julia started with that. Then we have Lucy, for First Lady for Rutherford Hayes. She was a really strong abolitionist, and she believed that men and women were and are equally intellectual human beings, that there should be no difference between what a man and a woman could actually learn and offer to others. She was the first lady to earn a college degree in the Wesleyan Female College. It doesn't matter that it was a female college, still she went to college. And she was also the first documented first lady having an independent public appearance in 1878 in the Philadelphia visit. So again, we're gonna get to see a lot of firsts, especially now since we're entering the 20th century. Then we have Lucretia Garfield for President Garfield. She was a French, algebra, and Latin teacher. Now, President Garfield on this moment in here, this particularly is the other way. So the President Garfield was her former Greek teacher. So she not only knew French and Latin and was excellent in algebra, but she also knew Greek. Now, I love her just because of one thing. She insisted and really insisted on paying Garfield's female physicians as much as the male one. All right, so you go to school, you become a doctor, a physician. Why are you paying women less than what are you paying men? I love her. I love that. So definitely she pushed on that, and she really got away with that. But that opened the opportunity for what we have now, of course. And she was the first presidential candidate wife to appear on a campaign poster. Now, all of this without then without her having the right to vote, because it's still 1881, a few years before when women were allowed to vote. Then Ellen Arthur, the wife of Chester Arthur, died before he took office. So she was really wealthy and he was a lawyer. And back then, lawyers really didn't make as much as they make now. So it was not a lucrative um, profession because it wasn't even, I don't want to be disrespectful, but law, it was not even being considered it as a professional, something that important as we have today. So many of the lawyers of back then, they were just reading books, and they became lawyers because they studied and stuff, right? Um, Arthur became president when Garfield was killed. There was no lady from September 1881 to January of 1883. So 2 years in there, there was actually no first lady. So there was a lot of misunderstanding in the fact of like, okay, so what has to be done now? So there was a president, but there was not a first lady. So there was not actually the first lady, but we have the hostess. So we do have a hostess from that time frame. So only no first lady. Now, Mary Arthur McMurray had opened houses, receptions in family quarters that were actually attended by more than 2,000 people. And she really didn't have an impact because she was not the first lady, but she was known because she was a strongly civil rights supporter for African Americans. So of course she was someone who was in favor of abolitionists, and she, of course, we have documents that say that she would have done a lot more, but she was not the first lady. So we know that she was a strong supporter of civil rights. Then we have Rose Cleveland for hostess for President Grover Cleveland. Cleveland's youngest sister served as the hostess prior to when he got married. She was a writer and she was an editor. So again, we get to see more of them now to have an education, a formal education, some of them to actually go to college. So it's very different from the moment that we started with Martha Washington. Now, Frances Fulton Cleveland, First Lady, because she became the wife of Grover Cleveland, she was very young, extremely young. He was almost in his 50s and 40 something, and she was just 21 years old. She was the youngest president's wife to become the first lady. She was the first presidential wife to call on head of state. She was visited in DC by the Queen of Spain, and she was the first one to be called first wife by someone different, by someone that was not American, by a different head of the state, by the Queen of Spain at that moment. Then we have First Lady Caroline for President Harrison. Now, before her marriage, before she was married with him, she was a music teacher and a home economics teacher. Now, she was the one that finally had electricity installed at the White House. So if the White House had lights today, we have her to thank for that. Not even President Benjamin Harrison, it was her. So what is this? From 1889 to 1892. Oh boy, it was that was a long time. And I love her too because this is what she was more fierce about. She wouldn't really support the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine unless they accepted women to become doctors. So she used her roles, she used her position, she took advantage of her position to actually help other women and to fulfill their dreams and their goals in life. Then we have Ida McKinley for President McKinley. Her father was a very strong abolitionist. She really had a public role in 1897 election because we have documents that say that she spoke with leaders and she met with leaders. So she was the first one who actually was able to speak and to meet and to actually be in connection with leaders, with political leaders. She's the first one known incumbent first lady to visit a foreign country as a first lady, and she went to Mexico. So again, she was the first lady to closing the 1800s and beginning the 1900s, the 20th century. So that was a first, and that was huge for sure. Then we have Edith for President Teddy Roosevelt. This was a little bit creepy when I first read the information, but you know, it took me by surprise. She grew up with Roosevelt's children, so she had the same age of his children and had a really close bond with him from a very young age. That's cool. And it's just that like it was like, wow, she was friends with her children, something like that. Now, she was the one who formally changed the name from the executive manor to White House. So before then that, it was both called the same, the both names. So it was called executive manor, it was called White House. She had the name changed as for the White House. And she had paintings of first ladies in the White House. So again, if we have paintings and portraits of the White Houses in the White Houses and the first ladies, it's because of her. So that way, anyone that comes to the White House can actually see the first ladies in their roles. Before than that, the White House didn't have that. And now actually entering and completely in the 20th century, we have Ellen Heron Taft, First Lady for William Howard Taft. She was the one who managed and arranged to plant thousands and thousands of cherry trees in DC. Why? We don't know exactly, but planting trees is never a bad decision. It's actually good. So we still have those cherry trees in there. Because I haven't been in there, so I don't know. But if we do, if Washington DC still have them, she is the one that we have to thank for. She was the first lady to ride with her husband in the inauguration parade. So before then that, only the president, not the first lady. And she was the first incumbent first lady, so she was in her role to attend a national convention. So what are we from the revolution, 17 something, all the way into 19, almost 200 years later? The first lady was actually allowed to be in the national convention, and she was there in 1912. That's the first. That's a big first. Then we have Ellen Wilson for President Thomas Woodrow Wilson. Now, she joined the president, she joined him, Wilson, in a tour to Georgia, her home state, as the first lady known to have such an overtly political appearance in public. So, some of the prior to her actually have some sort of connection, met with leaders and spoke with leaders, but she was the one who actually took advantage of the appearance and the public and really had a role politically, even though it wasn't like an impacting role in the sense of making something, but she openly had a voice in the political public appearance. And she was the first lady to pursue her own career during tenure. We're talking about 1913 and 1914. Still, not yet. She was not allowed to vote just yet. And hosted for Woodrow, Margaret, she was the one who actually did two different things that Ellen was not able to do. So during World War I, Margaret went to war zones in France against her father's wishes. So she didn't really want to do anything with the politics. She wanted to be, ironically, she wanted to be into the war action. She was one of 5 American women to be present at the signing of the treaty, right there of the peace treaty. So she wanted to be into that, not into the public experience of the politics. So very different roles in there, very extremely different roles. Now, Edith, First Lady for Woodrow Wilson, then after 1915 to 1921, she inherited the jewelry store of her first husband and she ran it. When her husband, Woodrow Wilson, suffered his stroke, she actually did something that not many people know, and to be honest, that a lot of people don't know. So she took over several routine duties and details of the executive branch of the government from the moment that he was ill until the moment that he left office almost a year and a half later. Not even members of the Congress and members of the Senate, the House of Representatives, not many, not even them knew what was going on and that she was the one in charge of all of that. So it was something that it was needed to be done, and she wasn't afraid to do it, and she did it. So that's extremely different. But I guess she was brave enough to do it, definitely. Now, finally, Florence Harding for President Warren Gamaliel Harding. She was the first one to be able to vote for her husband. Well, at least to vote. I don't know if she really voted for her husband, but at least she was she was granted the right of voting. She supported herself and her son by teaching piano after she was abandoned by him. So her first husband abandoned them, and she said, "I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna let this, drag me down. I'm actually going to support myself and my family." Now, eventually, she married President Harding. She was the first one to be allowed to vote. She was first lady from 1921 to 1923. She was the first one to get Secret Service protection, and she was the first one as a first lady to ride in an airplane. How did the other one that went to Mexico got to Mexico? I'm assuming that it was everything on train and then and then wagons and carriages because Florence was the actual to be a first lady to ride in the airplane. Very interesting. Then we have First Lady Grace for President Calvin and John Coolidge. She was educated in the University of Vermont, so no more a female college. She was in the University of Vermont. She then was trained, and she was a teacher in the Clark School for the Deaf in Massachusetts. So she was trained in sign language, and from 1902 to 1905, she was a teacher in the school in Massachusetts. And as a trained teacher, she brought attention to those with disability. As a trained teacher of the deaf, she really used that as something to inspire others and to really let the government know that we need to take these people. Also, they are citizens, they are human beings, and they need to learn. So if they cannot hear, but there has to be some way where they can learn, where they can go to college, where they can have a higher education. So she was the early and avid promoter of that. Unlike most of her predecessors, she avidly followed technology and advancement like radio and film. So I don't know why, but a lot of people were not interested in the filming. Filming was most likely something relatively new at this point. Radio was there for a longest time, but she used those too. So today she will be, I don't know, a very avidly, if you can say or imagine, using the advantage of technologies like we have now, social media and internet and computers. So she was very okay using the technology of her time. Then we have Lou Hoover for President Hoover. She and Hoover actually organized, because her tenure was from 1929 to 1933, right there in the beginning of World War II. So they both organized a campaign to feed more than 10 million Belgians and residents of Germany that occupied France. So they were there to help in a lot of soldiers. She was very comfortable speaking in public, and she did that across the country. So she didn't have any problem at all into having a public um, relationship with everybody, very different from many of her previous before her. And she was the first woman to actually earn a degree from the University of Stanford. Now, no, again, not a female college or anything, Stanford. And she did it in geology. So I love the fact that at least after the Civil War, things not only started to change, for our Black Americans, for the abolitionism, for slavery and everything, but also a lot of the things for women started to change. And we can see that in early 20th century. Now, I don't think she needs a lot of introduction. Everyone knows every time I go in person and do this particular program in person, she gets all the time, she gets a lot of clapping and everything. She is the famous, the more loved one. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt, her name was Anna Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, for President Roosevelt, of course, she was there for 12 years, so it's the longest serving first lady. She, and I love this, held press conference, okay, that broke really, really important news, all right? But she only allowed female reporters. So this was really catchy and sticky and smart. Those were really important news, but she only allowed female reporters. So actually the newspaper were forced to hire female reporters and give them substantive roles. Otherwise, no deal. So that was awesome. And then President Truman appointed her as the only female representative of the U.S. in the United Nations in 1945. That's pretty awesome, pretty cool too, to me at least, and we hope to you too. Next one is Elizabeth Truman. For President Harry Truman. She grew up with him. Now, when he was a store owner, she was the manager, but she wasn't paid. She was the accountant, she wasn't paid. When he was a judge, she was his advisor and aide, but she wasn't paid. And I was like, woman, she did so much, but still she wasn't paid. Hopefully I hope that at some point in her life she was paid, because that was like a lot of work for not being paid. She had a very active social life in the White House, and she has been the first lady to live longer than any other, and she died when she was 97. Now, Mommy, for David Eisenhower, Mommy is the name that I never saw this name before, but she was Mommy Geneva Eisenhower. She served as a very enthusiastic and energetic figure on his extensive and long 77-stop campaign tour. Now, if you take a look at the stop, it's because 77 stop, all of the campaigns, stopping from one town to the other, in train stations. I mean, this was not with an airplane. This was just driving, but was very, very expensive. She personally responded to all the letters. And in 1952 campaign, she was the first candidate's wife marketed to the women voters as part of the campaign. So a few years later, from the 19 amendments, from the moment that the women were allowed to vote, she took that in advantage, and took that advantage to actually market it to the woman. All right, so you are allowed to vote now. So she was very active. She was definitely supporting him and being very active. And she was the first president wife known to have been publicly kissed by him. So anything before then, before President Eisenhower and Mammy, um, any kids were just, behind the scenes and private because they were the first ones to be seen publicly kissing. Now then we have very long name, Jacqueline. I'm gonna say Kennedy because at this moment, she was the first lady for President Kennedy. She worked as a writer prior to marriage him, and she worked for the Washington Times Herald. Her fashion drew more attention than any other previous lady, and even to this day is one of the things that people really talk about. Her fashion, and she did a television special on her White House restoration. So again, a lot of years that we're talking about, 200 years later. So definitely, um, she restored the White House, and we have her to thank her for that. Then we have Claudia Lady Bird Johnson. For President Johnson, she was called Lady Bird since she was a child. She was very supportive of Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act, the only woman present for the signing at that moment. She started the White House Children's Garden, and she was highly involved in the administration, more than people really know or have any idea. And we have Pat Nixon, for President Nixon. She really helped and played an important role as Nixon's advisor. We have documents that say that. Very effective goodwill ambassador, and made the White House more accessible for those with disabilities. Something that, again, not a lot of people took in consideration. And she was, before Hillary Clinton, the first lady who traveled the most, of course, before Hillary Clinton. Then we have Elizabeth Ford, for President Rudolph Ford. Really, her openness about breast cancer encouraged many women to be checked. So she focused on equal rights for women in women's health. She was very comfortable giving speeches and speaking without any preparation. And she was the only candidate spouse to give a concession speech when he had laryngitis. So she was the only one who had that privilege to do that because he was sick at the moment of the concession. Now, Eleanor Smith Carter is the first lady for President Jimmy Carter, and she is the last one of these, we should say this old generation to be alive because she's still alive. She supported the Equal Rights Amendment, and she really held substantive meetings with political leaders in both Central and South America. So it was a very important role. She really tried to change the stigma around mental health. She was the first wife to make her own campaign promise to ensure that something about mental health was done, that there was a legislation that would at least something to start, because, and even to this day, it's a fight that we still have, but something about mental health needed to change. So she was very focused on that. Then we have Nancy Reagan. We all know her. She worked as an actress. She did 11 films, even 3 after she was married. She focused more into programs about drug education and prevention. So about teaching, about how the drugs were still in schools and sadly still are. So she really wanted to focus her moment as a first lady into that. She was the first lady to actually address in United Nations General Assembly on the fact of international drug traffic law. So it was something that it was her passion, and hopefully at least she opened the eyes of so many and educate many into this topic. Then we have Barbara Bush, president for George Bush father, and she really understood that she needed to cultivate an image about him. Like she needed, and she helped him into the sense of that people, so that people can see him as a family man, because she was really good avoiding controversy, and she knew how to manage the press. So she knew how to actually get in contact with people without the drama that other people actually create. She was very good, and she knew how to answer questions from the media. She was the first candidate's wife to address the convention that elected her husband. And here we're talking definitely 200 years later, but she was the first one who was able to talk in the convention. Now, to these days, everyone talks in those conventions in both the Republican and the Democrat one. She was the first one in the 90s. I mean, this is like really, really a long time after that. Now, with the last one, I'm just not gonna say anything that we already know. I'm just gonna say a little bit facts that a lot of people don't know. Uh, so after Hillary Clinton, most of the ones that we have until today, they were all either lawyers or really well educated. And Hillary went to jail school, and she was a lawyer before she was married. And what she practically wanted to do was focusing on children's health insurance program when she was the first lady. She was the first one to have her own office in the West Wing of the White House, and only the first lady to be elected to office herself. Because we all know that eventually she was, I think she was a senator. So Laura Bush for Bush son, she had a master's in library science, so she would work as a teacher. And again, she focused more as a governor's wife. She focused on literacy, early reading, early childhood development. Those were interesting. Then we have Michelle Obama. Again, she's also a lawyer from Princeton and Harvard School. She focused on military families, helping the military families. She supported the military families' spouses also as a personal mission, and she increasingly bonded with them. So she was very interested into that. And now Melania Trump is actually the second first lady to be born outside of the U.S. She was born in Slovenia. She started her modeling career at the age of 16, and then she launched her own jewelry collection in 2010. There's really not much that I can find that I found about her for me to share. And the current first lady that we have, Dr. Jill Biden, that not a lot of people know that she was born here in New Jersey, and she was raised between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. She was, of course, the second lady when President Obama was the president. She's the second wife of President Biden. She has a doctorate in education, so she is not only a teacher, but she also has a doctorate in education. Now, something that she did different to the other ones was that when she became the first lady, she brought back the Joining Forces program, which was put in hiatus by her predecessor. And this program is really important because it's a White House initiative to support military families, families of service, caregivers, and their survivors. So that's a really cool program that I'm doing a research right now, and it's really important because a lot of the families are here right now, and then their spouses are there fighting wherever they are, but then they need help here in the US. So that is the last one. And I'm hoping that we still have someone here because, like I said, this program is really, really long. We have so many to talk about, but this is the end of the program right now. Where is everybody?
Well, we're still here, and thank you to the people who are still here. Giselle, I think that I didn't know anything that you told us tonight. Most of it was all news to me, and fascinating news.
Yeah.
Fascinating that so many of these women were so far ahead of their times.
Yes, definitely. Can I stop sharing right now?
Sure,
So
sure.
yeah, thank you. So I can actually see everyone if they want to talk. Yeah, no, definitely. This is something that is very important because a lot of people don't know many of this information. Actually, most of the information. So when they see it, they say, "Wow, First Lady were really important."
Yes. So I don't see any questions in the chat. So I think we'll just wrap it up. I'm so amazed at the things I found out tonight. So thank you so much for all this research and information. And I'm actually going to do a little further research on a couple of them because it just really sparked my curiosity.
I'm gonna share you into your email. I'm gonna actually share some of the links for the research that we did, so that you can actually, if someone asks you a question later on, that you can actually help them. Because it's a lot. This program should be a 2-hour program because we have to shrink it down. I keep shrinking it down because it's so long and so vast with information.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, the president's wives who are still alive, we know so much about them. How did you do all this research? Where did you even find?
We really have to go to libraries. Actually, we really have to go to the Congress Library, New York Public Library also, and do a lot of research into really old documents that are access, that we can have access to them. And not only that, we have to transcribe those documents. Some of them are really real, especially the ones that from the revolution. So, and also the Declaration of Independence and the, what's the other one that I'm forgetting? The Constitution. So we have to check in the Constitution of each state. So the Constitution of the of the New Jersey has a lot of information also. Then you can do a good research, and we have that. So we have to really go deep and take like a 1 or 2 months and just immerse into all the information, and then try to collect and put everything into 1 hour, 1 hour space of program. And with the first lady, it's more difficult because, as you saw, we have hosts. So with the president, it's a little bit more easier to put it into 1 hour. Yeah.
Must have been fun. Well,
Yeah.
with that, I will give you another hearty thank you very much. And thank to everybody who came tonight. And if you would like to watch this recording again, it will be on our YouTube page in about a week.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone, to everyone that came. Thank you for having me. And whenever you're interested in booking another one, then you know where to find us. You have my email, and I'm going to share the other email, the education director, so you can have access with her to any of the programs.
Beautiful.
Very
Well,
nice to meet you.
good night, everybody.
Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.